welcome to another deep dive with us.
Yeah.
Today we're going to be tackling something that I think is pretty universal.
Yeah.
Fear.
Absolutely.
To help us kind of wade through all this,
Yeah.
we're turning to the wisdom of Krishnamurti.
Yeah. A really fascinating figure.
Mm-hmm.
Born in India in 1895,
Okay.
but became kind of this global teacher and speaker.
Yeah, and really challenged traditional thought and ways of thinking about life.
Yeah, he emphasized the individual's potential for transformation.
Okay.
Not through any kind of dogma or belief system,
Yeah.
but through self-awareness.
I like that.
Yeah.
So to guide us in this deep dive, we're going to be looking at his book on fear.
Okay.
As well as selections from his notebook.
Okay.
Which is really just a collection of his talks and dialogues spanning several decades. And our mission here is to really kind of get to the heart of what fear is, why it seems so ingrained in us, and if it's even possible to live beyond its grip.
Yeah, so right from the start, Krishnamurti makes this really important distinction between two types of fear. He talks about physical fear, which is that instinctive gut reaction that we all have to danger. Like, you know, that jolt that you get when you slam on your brakes to avoid an accident?
Right, or you almost step on a snake.
Exactly, like a primal response.
Yeah.
That's helped us to navigate threats for all of human history.
Right.
But then there's this other type of fear. He called it psychological fear. And this one is the one that tends to really linger. This is the fear that's tied to our thoughts, beliefs, and desires.
It's the one that keeps us up at night.
Exactly.
Yeah, replaying conversations, worrying about things that may or may not even happen.
Absolutely.
Our minds become like these fear factories, just churning out worst-case scenarios.
And Krishnamurti suggests that
by understanding these psychological fears, we can actually become better equipped to deal with even the physical fears.
Interesting.
It's like tackling the root of the problem rather than just trying to manage the symptoms.
So where do we even begin?
Well, Krishnamurti points to something that I think is really ingrained in our society, which is comparison.
Oh, interesting.
He argues that when we constantly compare ourselves to others, it creates this sense of inadequacy and fear.
That makes sense.
Because think about it.
Yeah.
How much of our lives are structured around comparison?
So real.
From school grades to job titles to the number of likes we get on social media.
All of it.
We're constantly measuring ourselves against others.
It's exhausting.
It is.
Yeah.
And it just fuels that fear of not being good enough.
Right, not being successful enough.
Yeah.
Not being spiritual enough.
He even uses this really great analogy
of chickens pecking in a farmyard.
To
illustrate this point.
I like that.
You know, we're all just kind of vying for position in this pecking order.
Right.
Driven by this deep-seated fear of being at the bottom.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, and he even suggests that this comparison game can show up in subtle ways. Even in our spiritual pursuits.
So it's not just like external achievements or material possessions.
Exactly.
It can affect even our desire for inner peace.
Absolutely.
Spiritual enlightenment.
Yeah, that fear of not being enough can permeate every aspect of our lives.
Wow.
And this leads to another really interesting point that Krishnamurti makes about the power of words.
Ooh, how do words play into this?
Well, he argues that words themselves can evoke these strong emotional responses that are connected to fear. He points out that words like loneliness or death aren't just neutral labels. They carry all this weight of past experiences and memories and anxieties.
So the word itself becomes a trigger.
Exactly. Like a shortcut to all those uncomfortable feelings we associate with it.
Like just hearing the word loneliness can bring up all these feelings of being isolated or disconnected.
It can evoke a whole flood of memories and anxieties.
And it's not just negative words either, right?
Exactly right.
Even words associated with positive things can get tangled up with fear.
Absolutely.
Like success.
For some people, that might trigger a fear of failure.
Oh, totally.
Or the pressure to constantly live up to some impossible standard.
I'm realizing now, like, how often I get caught up in these internal monologues that are just filled with all kinds of fear-laden words.
Yeah.
It's like I'm constantly bombarding myself with this negativity. And I don't even realize it.
And that brings us to what might be Krishnamurti's most profound point.
Lay it on me.
He argues that thought itself is the root of fear.
Wait, so you're saying that our own minds are the source of our fear?
He suggests that our minds are constantly creating these images.
Okay.
Projections about the future. And those fuel anxieties about what might happen.
So we get so caught up in all the mental movies that we're creating that we lose touch with the present moment.
Exactly.
And we just get swept away by fear.
He uses this example of fearing death to illustrate this point.
Yeah.
He says that while the actual experience of dying might be very quick, it's the thought of it projected into the future that generates all this fear and anxiety.
We're living in this constant state of anticipation.
Exactly.
Worrying about things that might not even happen.
And it keeps us from fully experiencing the present moment.
Right.
Which is the only place where true freedom from fear can actually exist.
Okay, so we've got comparison, we've got the power of words, and this idea that thought itself is the engine of fear.
Right.
Where do we go from here? Oh, it's starting to feel a little overwhelming.
I know it can be a lot to take in.
Yeah.
But don't worry. Krishnamurti doesn't leave us hanging.
Okay.
He actually offers some really interesting insights into how we can break free from this cycle of fear.
Okay, I'm all ears.
All right, well, that's what we're going to dive into next time.
All right, so we'll be back in part 2 to unpack all that and more. Welcome back to our deep dive into fear with J. Krishnamurti.
Yeah.
Before the break, we were talking about how comparison, the power of words, and even thought itself can fuel this often overwhelming emotion.
It can feel like fear is just woven into the fabric of our lives.
Totally.
But Krishnamurti also offered a way of relating to fear that doesn't involve trying to, like, conquer it or suppress it.
So not about pretending we're not afraid or trying to become like some fearless superhero.
No, not at all. He actually believed that. The more we resist fear, the stronger it becomes.
Oh, interesting.
So he suggested a more radical approach, which is observing fear without judgment.
Okay, so what does that actually look like?
Yeah, how do you just observe fear without getting totally swept away by it?
Right.
Well, it starts with becoming aware of fear as a sensation in the body, as a feeling rather than a story. So instead of getting caught up in all the thoughts and anxieties that often accompany fear, try just noticing the physical sensations, the tightness in your chest, the racing heart, the shallow breathing.
So it's almost like shifting our attention from the mental chatter to the physical experience of it.
Exactly. And that can be a really powerful shift. Because it allows us to create a space between ourselves and the fear.
I see.
So we're no longer completely consumed by it. We become the observer.
It's the victim.
When I get really anxious, it does feel like I'm drowning in my own thoughts. If I could just learn to observe the sensations without getting carried away by the stories, maybe I could stay afloat.
And that brings us back to what Krishnamurti said about thought being the engine of fear. You know, he reminded us that our thoughts aren't always accurate reflections of reality.
They're often
projections based on past experiences or worries about the future.
Like if I'm terrified of public speaking, my mind might automatically jump to, I'm going to make a fool of myself. Everyone's going to judge me. But are those thoughts actually true?
Exactly.
Or are they just fear-based assumptions?
That's the kind of questioning that Krishnamurti encouraged. You know, he said. The important thing is to be aware of the thought. To observe it.
Without condemnation, without identification. Just to see it as it arises and to let it go.
So recognizing those fear-based thoughts. Acknowledging them without judgment. And then choosing not to get hooked by them.
It takes practice, of course.
Yeah.
But the more we question those automatic thoughts, the more we can loosen their grip on us.
I'm realizing now how much I get trapped in my own head, constantly replaying past mistakes or worrying about potential future disasters.
Yeah, like we're creating our own personal fear fest up there.
Totally.
And that's why Krishnamurti emphasized the importance of understanding our relationship with time. He said, fear is always in relation to something that has happened or something that might happen. It's always in the past or in the future. Fear is time.
So if we're constantly dwelling in the past or projecting into the future, we're basically living in a state of perpetual fear.
He challenges us to consider this.
Okay.
Can we finish with yesterday's pain? Truly let it go.
Yeah.
And thereby break the chain of fear linked to time.
That's a big question.
It is a big question.
How do we let go of past hurts?
Right.
Or stop worrying about what might happen in the future?
Well, Krishnamurti didn't offer a simple formula.
Okay.
He believed that this process of letting go requires self-awareness, honest inquiry, and a willingness to challenge those habitual patterns of thinking that keep us trapped in fear.
So it's not about erasing the past.
Right.
Or pretending we don't care about the future.
Exactly. It's about finding a way to be fully present in this moment without getting bogged down by all the regrets or anxieties.
And this is where things like meditation or mindfulness can be really valuable.
We hear a lot about these things these days.
Yeah. How do they fit into all of this?
Well, for Krishnamurti, meditation wasn't about escaping reality or achieving some kind of blissful state.
Right.
It was about cultivating a deep awareness of our own minds.
Okay.
It was about becoming the observer of our thoughts and feelings without getting caught up in their drama.
So instead of constantly reacting, we can learn to create this space. Where we just observe them.
Exactly.
Without judgment.
And in that space of observation, a sense of freedom can emerge.
That sounds amazing.
It is?
But is this even possible? Like for those of us who haven't spent years meditating on a mountaintop?
Well, Krishnamurti himself acknowledged that this is an ongoing process. He said, the emptying of the mind of fear is not an intellectual feat. It's not the result of a system, a method. It comes about when the mind is quiet, when it's not caught in the net of thought.
So it's not about achieving some perfect state of fearlessness overnight.
It's about cultivating this inner quiet, a stillness that allows us to see things more clearly.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
This potential for freedom from fear is already present.
It is.
Within us. We just need to learn how to access it.
And one way to access it is to start paying attention to those moments when fear arises. What are the thoughts that are fueling the fear? What are the words we're using to describe it? What are the physical sensations we're experiencing?
So it's about becoming like a detective of our own experience.
That's a great way to think about it. And as we become more skilled at recognizing fear, we can start to see it more clearly without getting completely swept away by it.
This is making me wonder if there are like specific things we can do to cultivate that inner stillness.
Absolutely.
Create more space for observation and less reactivity.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And that's where we'll pick up in the next part of our deep dive. We'll explore some practical tools and insights that Krishnamurti offered.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Welcome back to our exploration of fear with J. Krishnamurti.
Yes.
We've been diving deep into, his ideas about how comparison, the power of words, and even thought itself can fuel this often overwhelming emotion.
Yeah.
But let's get practical. How do we actually apply Krishnamurti's wisdom to break free from fear's grip?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Luckily, Krishnamurti was all about translating these profound philosophical ideas into actionable steps.
Less theory, more tools for transformation.
Exactly. He wasn't interested in just talking about fear. He wanted to help people free themselves from it.
So one of the most powerful practices he suggested is something we've already touched on. Becoming the observer. Remember, it's not about denying fear or pretending it doesn't exist. It's about creating space between ourselves and the fear.
So instead of immediately getting swept away by those anxious thoughts and stories, we pause and we observe.
So how do we actually do that?
It's easy to say observe your fear. But when those panic buttons get pushed,
all logic goes out the window.
That's where practice comes in. Think of it like building a muscle. The more we practice observing our fear without judgment, the easier it becomes to access that space of awareness, even amidst the chaos.
So what does this practice actually look like?
Oh, yeah. Can you give me an example? Sure. So imagine you're about to give a presentation.
Okay.
And that familiar waves of anxiety starts to rise.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of letting those thoughts like, oh, I'm going to mess this up.
Right.
Take over.
Yeah.
Try this.
Okay.
Take a deep breath.
Okay.
And simply notice what's happening in your body.
Mm-hmm.
Feel the tightness in your chest.
Yeah.
The fluttering in your stomach.
Mm-hmm.
The dryness in your mouth.
Okay.
Just observe those sensations without labeling them as good or bad.
So we're kind of becoming like scientists of our own experience.
I love that.
Yeah.
Just noticing the data without jumping to conclusions.
And the interesting thing is, when we shift our attention from the mental chatter to the physical sensations, the fear often starts to lose its intensity.
It does.
Yeah.
It's still there.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have the same overwhelming power.
We're taking away fear's power by acknowledging its presence without feeding it with all those anxious thoughts and stories.
Krishnamurti also emphasized the importance of questioning the thoughts that fuel our fears.
Okay.
He reminded us that our thoughts aren't always accurate reflections of reality.
Right.
They're often projections based on past experiences or worries about the future.
So if I'm afraid of flying, my mind might start bombarding me with these images of plane crashes or thoughts about losing control. But are those thoughts based on any real evidence? Or are they just...
are they just manifestations of your fear?
That's the kind of inquiry.
That's what he wanted us to do. He wanted us to become more aware of the stories we tell ourselves, the assumptions we make, and how those narratives contribute to our experience of fear.
It reminds me of something we talked about earlier, about the power of words. If simply hearing the word loneliness can trigger a cascade of anxieties, imagine what a whole string of fear-based thoughts can do.
Exactly. The language we use, both internally and in our conversations, has a profound impact on how we experience fear.
So it's about becoming more conscious of the inner dialogue that's constantly running and making a choice to use language that supports our well-being.
Absolutely.
Rather than fueling our fears.
And this is where practices like meditation or mindfulness can be incredibly helpful.
I'm curious about how Krishnamurti viewed meditation. Did he think that everyone needs to sit in silent contemplation for hours a day?
Yeah, he wasn't about...
find freedom from fear.
He wasn't about rigid techniques or dogmas.
Okay.
He believed that meditation at its core is about cultivating a quality of attention and inner stillness that allows us to observe our thoughts and feelings without judgment.
So it's not about escaping reality. Or achieving some blissful state.
It's about learning to be present with what is...
even the uncomfortable stuff.
Even the uncomfortable stuff. And this ability to be present, to observe without judgment, is what opens the door to freedom from fear.
He said, when you become aware of fear, you are already beyond it.
I love that quote.
Me too.
It suggests that awareness itself is a kind of liberation.
And this journey of self-discovery is an ongoing process.
It is.
There are going to be times when fear arises.
Of course.
But the key is
to keep practicing those tools that help us create space between ourselves and the feeling.
So it's not about achieving some perfect state of fearlessness.
No, it's about developing a new way of relating to fear.
One that's based on awareness, compassion, and a willingness to keep learning and growing.
Beautifully.
This deep dive has offered a lot to reflect on.
I think so.
If fear is a product of our thinking, can we learn to observe those thoughts in their relationship to fear without judgment? And thereby loosen fear's grip?
I think that's the question we all need to be asking ourselves.
I encourage you to explore Krishnamurti's work further. Especially his book on fear.
It's a journey worth taking.
It's a journey worth taking, one that might lead you to a life of greater freedom, clarity, and peace.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks for joining us.